So it's Friday night in Warsaw. That's in Poland. That's in Europe. That's in the world. It's the day before Grand Prix Warsaw. Everything is set up. The booth is ready. The feature match area is ready. I'm ready. Everything's plugged in. Everything seems to work. Everything's great. So it's got to be, I don't know, 7:45 in the evening, and I go and see my good friend Jason Howlett, who is running side events. And I say, dinner? Sure. About an hour and a half. Now that's a long time to wait in a rapidly emptying convention centre. So I say, not to worry, I'll just go eat myself. And he says, unless, of course, you want to be the 8th person in a turbo draft. A what? I say. A turbo draft. Now, a turbo draft, it turns out, is where you set money on fire. Well, sorry, you spend money and you get 3 packs of Ixalan and you draft with 7 brand new friends, usually, and then you play one of them, and then if you win, you get 10 packs or 100 prize tickets, which you can turn into 10 packs, or you lose and you get nothing. Everyone keeps whatever they draft, obviously. So normally, I would think, well, sarcasm, it's the lowest form of wit, this is known. Turbo draft, that sounds like the lowest form of magic while still being magic. If you stoop any lower, it's almost commander. So at that point, I think, a draft plus a round, that's probably about an hour and a half's entertainment. That, strangely, is the time I need before dinner. It's time for me to play some magic! Yay! I love playing magic. I don't know if you know that. So I sit down with my 7 new friends and I draft. Now, I'm not a fan of bad beat stories. Indeed, one of my great regrets in life is that when I was in San Francisco at the World Championship in 2011, I didn't buy the t-shirt that said, "Cool story, bro, tell it again." Because actually, just bad beats, no one wants to hear them. Nobody cares. So this is not a bad beat story. I just want to let you know that now before you fast forward. So I sit down to draft, and I would describe myself as, let's see, I'm better than the average player because I get to draft quite a lot, and I'm better than the average player because I get to play with a lot of very good players and I learn a lot of things. I'm not a good drafter because I don't draft enough on Magic Online to have drafted 50 to 100 times, let's say, and so there are plenty of archetypes that I'm relatively inexperienced in playing, and I don't draft as well. I don't make the close picks as well as I might, but certainly against, with the greatest of respects, Friday at a Grand Prix, I have a pretty good chance of doing pretty well most of the time. If I do a full draft, I generally expect to either 2-1 or 3-0 in that company, where lots of people are casual players, they're arriving for a GP, this is not the big event of their weekend, it's the big event of my weekend. It's the only event of my weekend. So, certainly not clueless, let's say. I drafted what may, after more than 20 years in the game, have been the single worst draft deck, not only that I've ever drafted or played, but maybe that I've ever seen. It wasn't quite as bad as if I had disconnected after pick 1, pack 1 on Magic Online and come back halfway through pack 3, but it was close. I start off with a Glorifier of Dusk. This is a fine card, but I'd like you to remember that even here, in pick 1, pack 1, I'm busy thinking the words, it's a shame that it's a 5-drop, because I don't want many of those in my deck, because 5's a lot, and this is an aggressive format, and I like to be cheap and efficient, and 1s and 2s and 3s, and I mean, it's a good card, but it's the end of my deck. I don't really want it to have to take it this early, but there it is. All of that goes on pick 1, pack 1. Then I take a call to the feast second, so now I've got a 5 and a 4, and I'm thinking maybe I'm going to be vampires. And then I get a Sky March Bloodletter third. Okay, so now I've got 5, 4, 3, and at this point I've got a double white card, a white black card, and a black card, and I'm thinking, okie dokes, I guess I'm in vampires. So off I go. Except I'm not in black-white vampires. I'm not in black-white anything. I am in black-white. What I'm in is 5 drops. I'm in 5 drop hell. Clearly, Joker to my right moves into black-white. But what I can't tell until I'm sort of 8 picks in is where I may or may not be going. So I'm picking things like Imperial Aerosaur. There's nothing wrong with a 3/4 fly for 5, except that it costs 5. There's nothing wrong, indeed there's a lot right, with Anointed Deacon, because it's great, and it works really well with Call to the Feast and Vampire tokens. They become 3/1 lifelinkers. Except, of course, it costs 5. So I think about this for a while, and I get to the end of pack 1, and I'm looking at, I think, probably 3 5 drops, couple of 4s, the Sky March Bloodletter. I've probably got 7 black and white cards, and it's clear that I'm in the wrong place. And at this point I think, well, okay, let's just pretend that the Call to the Feast doesn't exist. I'm certainly willing to not play Imperial Aerosaur, but realistically I'm going to end up playing it because I want to play the Glorifier of Dusk, so it's probably the black that I'm going to end up losing. So I open pack 2. And there, confronting me, is a Planeswalker. It's Watley, Warrior Poet. You what? You what? You what? You what? You Watley? As they say in Newcastle. Or Newcastle. So I take Watley. And I think, well, maybe I'm going to end up red-white. And obviously that wants to be super aggressive, so I think I'll prioritise the low drops and so on. And what happens is that I keep getting 5 drops. And 5 drops, and nothing playable lower, and spells but not creatures, and green cards, and the occasional blue card, and it's just, there is no pattern to anything. It's like everyone at the table's disconnected, except the guy on my right who evidently moved into black-white vampires when I found out too late. So I draft away, and eventually I end up with a deck. Now I'd like you to again praise me here, people. Aware of what a train wreck was coming around the corner at me, I think, do you know what's better than 5 drops? 4 drops. So I pick a Hierophant's Chalice to at least give me a chance at playing one of my many 5 drops on turn 4. Because actually, Sky March Bloodletter on 3, and then, getting an Anointed Deacon out. I found ways to win. There were definitely ways to win in my deck. I end up playing every conceivable playable, with the exception of a makeshift munitions, which I decided not to splash. I had almost no token generators. And I end up with a black-white deck that is not vampires, really, although it has 2 Anointed Deacon, and it has the Call, the Grave and so on, and yeah. How many 5 drops do you think is the right answer in this format? I'm going to guess at somewhere in the range of 0 to 2. Well, I played 8 5 drops. 8 5 drops. That's at least 5 too many. And the thing was, was I going to cut the Glorifier of Dusk? I was not. Was I going to cut the Imperial Aerosaur? Well, possibly, but I didn't have anything else to put in. Was I going to cut Contract Killing? I was not. Was I going to cut the 2 Anointed Deacons? I was not. I just could not find creatures anywhere. The one pick that I had a shot at was a Queen's Bay Soldier, which I could have picked second, and that would have got me a 2-drop. Anyway, so I end up with this hideous top-heavy deck. And I'm absolutely certain that I basically just can't win. It's only if they mulligan to 5 twice that I have any chance at all, is the way I see things. So I'm playing, 8 plains, 8 swamps, and a couple of mountains for Watley. And of course my Hierophant's Chalice. So I'm going to admit something now. In general, I think it's pretty disrespectful when you sit down with someone if you don't find out a little bit about them. And by a little bit about them, I mean their name. So when I see life pads that say me and op, or op and R, or op and rich, I always think, I think you've missed an opportunity there to humanise the human being on the other side of the table. That's my general philosophical view of the universe. However, I'm certainly prepared to acknowledge that on occasion, I just can't be bothered. All I need you to be is breathing and on the other side of the table with a magic deck. You don't need to have a wife, family, social security number, or indeed a name. You just need to have hands that can spew cards onto the battlefield so that I can get my fix of my favourite game. This was such an occasion. So I sit down for my one match, by which time my good friends from coverage have finished what they've been doing, and they come along. And I'm sure you can imagine that periodically I get a bit of an audience around the table, because, look, it's Rich playing Magic. Because whenever I play Magic, people go, I didn't know you played Magic. I said, I don't really. So I sit down across from this guy who seems very pleasant, and he goes up in my estimation. He's clearly a smart human being, because he says, Rich, I'm a huge fan. Love what you do for the game. Great. So we instantly hit it off. You'll find that works very well with me telling me how great I am. That's just always a good plus point. Rich, you're lovely. Rich, would you like chocolate? Those are all good openings. So we sit down, and in general, I find that the more tired I am, the more my brain doesn't get to interact with my mouth, shall we say. And I tend to just splurt things. They just pop out before I've had time to think about them. This can be very entertaining to people standing nearby, not necessarily good for my well-being overall, or the people around me. And this is one of those times. I'm pretty tired. I just want to chill out and relax. And this guy seems really friendly and seems up for having a fun time. There is this unspoken acknowledgement that we are indeed playing the lowest form of Magic known to man without it actually being Commander. And so we decide to have some fun. I offer to commentate on the match while we're playing. This is a service I offer to all my opponents should I get the sense that they may wish it. It's quite entertaining, particularly when I'm trying to hide what I've drawn from them, but of course as the commentator I can see what I've drawn, which does tend to give a bit of a strategic edge to my opponents, but hey, never mind. So game 1 goes a surprisingly long time, because I do have a little bit of removal, and I do have some creatures that actually sort of have power and toughness, and if the game goes long I get to actually deploy some 5-drops and turn, if nothing else, a 3/3 Anointed Deacon into a 5/3 Anointed Deacon. And my opponent is playing green-red, sort of not particularly rampy, but into dinosaurs. Has big dinosaurs at the back end, has thunderous whatever, and just bunch of 6-drops and 7-drops and diddle, and then here's some big thing. And he's got a pounce that he's used. And anyway, the game goes long, and he wins to my intense non-surprise. And that's totally fine, because I'm having a really good time with my new friend whose name I don't know, because on my scorepad it just says Op and R. And he's got this interesting accent that I can't quite place. And I talked to him about it between games 1 and 2. I said, look, I'm trying to work out where you're from, because you've got a hint of German, you've got a lot of French, and there's something else there that makes it not quite either, and I'm wondering whether in fact you're Swiss, or you're German and now live in Switzerland, or you're French and now live in Switzerland, something like that. And we talk about it, and anyway, this guy turns out to be French. Still don't know his name. And so we play game 2. He mulligans to 6, and I smash him. Yes, I destroy him. Absolute nonsense. I make my 1/1 drop. I make one of my 2/2 drops. I go Sky March Bloodletter on 3. I make another Sky March Bloodletter on 4. Then I make an Anointed Deacon on 5. And then I kill him. That's basically what happens. And at this point, there's probably 8 to 10 people just hanging around the table listening to the banter. And I've reached the point where I'm basically prepared to show my opponent my cards as I draw them. It's like, look, this is what I've got. Do you think it's any good? I don't know why I'm playing it. What's this doing in my deck? It's a little disconcerting because most people don't play as loose as this. And against the wrong person, I guess it could be very irritating. And if that's ever been you, I do apologise. But like I say, I'm there to have fun. This guy seems to be as well. And I say, all right, let's see if we can pull off the miracle. Seems pretty unlikely, doesn't it? He said, I don't know, your deck seems pretty good. I said, well, it did there. It did. So we play game 3. Yes. How many, I asked how many 5 drops were good, and 8 wasn't the right answer. So let me ask another question that you can't answer because this is on playback. So now if you answer it out loud, I won't hear you because I may well be in bed because that's time zones. How many Pounce should you play in a green-red dinosaur deck with lots of high-end dinosaurs? What do you think the right number is for that? 1, you'd certainly play 1. 2 seems quite reasonable. How about infinite? That's what I faced in game number 3. In game number 3, we play along for a bit, and we're having quite a reasonable game of Magic, and I'm actually feeling mildly hopeful. I've got some flyers down, and I'm putting on a little bit of pressure, because dinosaurs, apart from grazing whiptail, not that grazing whiptail flies, but it does have reach. By and large, the dinosaurs don't fly, and I'm starting to put a bit of pressure on, as I say. And then he makes Conqueror's Galleon, some 2/10 vehicle thing. And then the game goes a bit longer and he attacks with it and I block with a 3/3 and it transforms and then it becomes something else and it stops being a vehicle and it sits on his side of the battlefield in his lands and he starts drawing cards and then more cards and then he gets to 8 mana and he pounces one of his enormous dinosaurs to kill one of my smaller things and then he spends 8 mana to bring Pounce back from the graveyard, and then he uses Pounce to make one of his enormous dinosaurs kill one of my smaller things. But I'm still hitting him, and I've got him down to 7. And then he spends 8 mana, and he brings Pounce back and uses it with one of his enormous dinosaurs to kill one of my dwindling army of smaller creatures. But that's okay, because I keep pounding him. And now I've got Dark Nourishment, because that's one of my 8/5 drops. And I kill something of his and deal him 3. And now he's down to 2. And he spends 8 mana and brings Pounce back from the graveyard and kills one of my almost non-existent smaller things. The game continues. I point out when I'm at 20 that if he attacks me with everything, that will be 20 damage, and I have no blockers. I tell him that I have only 3 land in my hand. He doesn't believe me, so I show him 2 of them. And now he's really worried because he's certain that my 3rd card is something, which it isn't. It's a 3rd land. It's always a 3rd land if I tell you it is. I never lie. He won't attack. I'm like, I promise you, if you attack, I won't block and I'll die because I've just got 3 land. I know, I don't know. I don't think I can trust you on this. You really can. So he hits me for 9. And I Top deck, because I had a chance for the win, and I'm thinking of all the things that could conceivably win me the game, and there are things that could conceivably win me the game, despite this 6 lots of pounce recursion action that's happened. And I don't draw anything, and I pass the turn back, and I'm at 11, and he's got like 26 power of things. And I say, if you attack with everything, you're going to kill me. You really are. And he attacks me for another 9 and puts me to 2 and leaves like 17 things back on defense. Not quite true, but close. Certainly what it feels like. And I go, you've opened up the door for a profound top deck victory. Here it comes. And I look, and it isn't the win. And he wins. And that was that. And we shake hands. You were expecting some profoundly exciting top deck thing there, weren't you? But no. So we shake hands. I say, thanks for the game. Hope you had fun. I certainly did. It was really nice to meet you. And best of luck this weekend. And I walk away, and it's time for dinner, and it's filled in the hour and a half just nicely. And as I walk away, I pick up my score pad, and he's gone. And I realise that despite having spent the last hour with him, still don't know his name. Welcome to episode 2 of Talking Points, or Talking Points. Hello everyone then, welcome along to Talking Points, or Talking Points, depending on your viewpoint. I am your host, Rich Hagon, welcoming you to the entertainment capital of the world, that is, of course, Gainsborough in the United Kingdom. We have a lovely green screen behind me, so God knows what manner of hell and havoc may be wreaked behind my head by the video editors at Hipsters of the Coast, with whom this show is being produced. So it's all down to them. You can thank them or blame them as you see fit. So this week on the show, we're going to talk about 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 Grand Prix around the world. And we're going to do it in chronological order, because that's the kind of organised human being that I'm not. We're going to start with Grand Prix Shanghai on day 1. Then we're going to move across to Grand Prix Warsaw, where I was playing on Friday night, as you may have just heard. And then we'll move across to Grand Prix Atlanta, which is in somewhere called the United States of America. Then, because we haven't finished our tale of Shanghai, we will go back to the Asia-Pacific region. We'll talk about day 2 in Shanghai and how somebody won a Grand Prix. And then we'll go back to Warsaw, where I was, as you may have heard if you were listening earlier in the show. And then we'll go to Grand Prix Atlanta, which was almost certainly still in the United States of America on day 2 as well as on day 1. Once we've done all that, we'll talk about somewhere else in America, which is called Portland, where the next Grand Prix is going to happen. I will tell you a very short but spectacularly funny joke. And then I'll tell you something else about Friday night in Warsaw. So let's get to it. Excuse me. So, Grand Prix Shanghai. The first thing you need to know about Grand Prix Shanghai is that the venue was incredibly sinister. Just take a moment to think about what would you name a building if you wanted it to sound incredibly sinister? What's your best offer? Well, Grand Prix Shanghai was it's obviously in a convention centre, called the Happiness Factory. I'm not making that up. Where shall we hold our annual Dental Association dinner? Why, I do believe the Happiness Factory would be appropriate. Dear Sir or Madam, the police chief of Shanghai would like to cordially invite you to the Happiness Factory. So Grand Prix Shanghai was in the Happiness Factory. I'm sure everyone had a marvellous time, and I'm sure the name of the building contributed massively to it. So let's talk about where we were on day 1. Remember, everything this weekend was standard. So we came out the Pro Tour going, presumably some kind of energy deck is the best thing in the room. Where do we go from there? Let's find out. So some people who were allegedly good at Magic. How did they do? 6 and 3s. Yuki Ichikawa, Tour Ixalan, the oldest man at the Pro Tour, 55. Ken Yukihiro, supporting Ken Yukihiro till the bump in the night. Yeah, he went 6 and 3 as well. Kazuaki Fujimura, 6 and 3 as well. 7 and 2s. Hao Shanhuang, who remember was DQ'd at the Pro Tour, and we talked about that at length last week. So 7 and 2 for him. Kenta Harada, the national champion from Japan, 7 and 2. Tomohiro Saito, former Player of the Year, 7 and 2. Finalist from Pro Tour Battle for Zendikar, Ryoichi Tamada, 7 and 2. 8 and 1. Number 8 in the world, Kelvin Chu from Singapore, who is, I would say, he's rapidly cementing himself as legitimately a top 25 pro. He just is there all the time now. He simply is one of the best players in the game at the moment. Yuya Watanabe, number 12 ranked, coming in, also 8 and 1. Yan Wing Chung, trying to get one stage further. Remember, he was 10 and 0 at the Pro Tour, finished 11-4, 11-5. He went 8 and 1 on day one. And from the home team, Yu Chen from Team MTG Sheep went 8 and 1. What about 9 and 0s? Well, there were 2 of them. There was Tatsuya Kojima, about whom I know. Okay, I've told you everything now. And Takuma Morifuji. Now, Morifuji, better known, certainly a decent player, some Pro Tour experience. The only 2 guys who were sort of top seeds, if you will, Riku Kumagai, Kenji Samura, they were out. They didn't make day 2. So, yeah, a reasonable bunch. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 players on the watch list. 13 of them make day 2. Fair enough. All pretty straightforward. You'd expect that. Bear in mind, vast amount of this field are going to be from China, from mainland China, or indeed from the Shanghai region generally. Probably not a massively high standard, all in all. No offence, just being realistic. 13 of 15, therefore, make day 2. So then we go to where I was in Warsaw, playing Magic on Friday night, as I'll tell you more about later in the show. Tons of people. I was actually quite impressed. So, look, everything in Magic goes in cycles. Magic is a world where particular countries, particular regions ebb and flow. So you can point to periods in Magic history where there were a whole group of Belgians who were terrific. You can look at the time when the Netherlands had a stack of great players. You can say Japan had complete global dominance for a period and then had a fallow period. There was a time when the US, despite being by far the biggest player base, had almost no one at the absolute top of the game. Sort of in the late zeros, 2008 to 2009, Brian Kibler, Louis Scott Vargas on the rise, not an awful lot else, really. And it just goes in waves. Right now, I think France is doing very nicely, thank you. There's a lot of decent players coming up behind Jeremy Desani and Pierre Dajon, and of course your Raphael Levy, who's still doing his thing, except when he's having a first child like he was at the Pro Tour last week. So I have felt over the last 2 to 3 years that the European scene has been a little bit weak, quite frankly, that there haven't been a lot of star names at the top tables, that there have been some very workmanlike champions, players who've had a goodish deck, played it pretty well, beaten some decent-ish people, got a bit lucky like everyone does, won a Grand Prix. The star power kind of hasn't been there. So as I look through the start list for Grand Prix Warsaw, I was actually really impressed how many rock-solid players there were. I sort of got up to 50 or so. So, give you an example. So, we're always looking for feature matches early in the day, so we go through who has no buys and 1 and 2 before we get to the 3 buy pros. Obviously, they come in. So, Stepan Susic, had 0 buys. Przemysław Oberbiek of Poland, he had 2 Grand Prix top 8s, both of them in Warsaw, in that building. So that was a great way to start the coverage. We'll bring him on. He made it today too, Susic didn't. A 1 buy, Jonathan Gillespie, who's a terrific legacy player, does a ton on Magic Online, played in the Magic Online Championship. He went 6-3. Yuri Babic, 7-2. Kenneth Ellingson's Grand Prix top 8 from Denmark didn't make day 2. Neither did Mateusz Kopecz, old-time Polish player. Thomas Kuchter of the Czech Republic, he went 7-2, which was decent. Andrew Quinn of England did not post. He always posts on Facebook how he's doing, so he's quite fun to follow along with. Does make day 2 sometimes. Not this time. I'm not sure he won a game. Elie Pichon from France, 6-3. Raul Porojan, who used to be a tremendous German player during the mid-2000s, now is much more casual, but does still come along to a few GPs. He went 7-2. Nikolai Potovin, who there was certainly a point for him, so he's Russian. There was a point in Magic history, probably about 2008, where Potovin was one of the toughest opponents you could possibly face. He was utterly granite. He knew every rule. He was precise. He was crisp. He was clean. He worked hard at the game. He never tilted. He was just a monster to play against. He moved away from the game, as many do, and he never quite achieved what I think he would have done had he just stuck around a bit longer. He went 7-2 on day 1. And then, hats off to Marshall Sutcliffe. Do I have a hat here? I don't. We'll use the skull. Let's go on there. So, yes, hats off to Marshall Sutcliffe. Well done, Marshall. I tip my cap to you. Yes, well done, sir. Thanks, Skull. Marshall sent me an email during the week and said, Rich, let me tell you about a guy called Sasha Lucia. Off you go then, Marshall. Sasha Lucia is a dude, EHEH_DUDE on Magic Online. And he plays a ton of Limited and is regularly at the very top of the draft trophies won in competitive draft play. Okay, I thought to myself, you do know it's standard, don't you, Marshall? But anyway, Marshall said, look, I don't think he's got many buys, probably just 1 buy, so he might be a great candidate for a round 2 feature match. Well, hats off, Marshall. Oh, yes. It was great, because Sasha Lucia turned out to be A, good at Magic, B, winning, and C, very popular. Tons of people in the chat were like, hey, look at A, dude, get him back in, let's have him again, how's Sasha doing? Which is awesome, because we love to be able to bring people at home the players they want to see. Yes, it can be fairly unlikely if you say, hello, I'm from Malta, and my friend is playing in their first Grand Prix. I've lost track of them since they were 0 and 7. Can they have a feature match? That's generally at the low end of likelihood. But when tons of you are in the chat room going, we'd love to see so-and-so, we do pay attention. We can't always make it happen, but it was a win-win all round. Sasha ended up 8 and 1 on day 1. Remember, so far we just talked about players with 1 buy. Now, 2 buys. This is where you get lots of very good players. You get lots of people, everyone who's won a trial, of course. So there were tons here. Elliot Bousseau of France, he's the one who went 8 and 2 with blue-white approach. We got him on camera. It didn't do anything. It's one of those things where if you want to see what a deck does, you really need it 2-3 rounds in a row. And whenever we pull an interesting deck into the feature match area, we're very aware that what may happen is it just gets smashed by something normal and ordinary, and everyone's like really disappointed. And that's what happened in the feature match with Elliot Bousseau. Indeed, Elliott only won one match all weekend. He had 2 byes, finished at 3 and something before he gave up and presumably went to draft or whatever else. So not a good result for him, but great to see the blue-white cycling deck on camera. Maybe I said approach earlier as well. I meant cycling, Drake Haven and stuff, which was super cool. An abandoned sarcophagus, I think I've got that right. So then, David Brooker, long-time pro back in the day, sort of your mid-2000s, 2003 to 2008, somewhere in that range. That was his peak. Went away from the game for a long period of time. Back again, routinely doing well, went 8-1 with an energy deck. Autumn Burchett, the English national champion, you'll see her in action at the World Magic Cup in a couple of weeks. She went 7-1-1 on the day with an unintentional draw. Marco Camiluzzi of Italy, he missed out. Zhao Shosa of England, 6-3. Bill Chronopoulos, he ran out of time because he went 6-1-2. See what I did there? Chronopoulos, Chronos. It's like Greek time, 2 draws, run out of. You can send me the bill. See, Bill. Martin Dang, not a good day. Amon Dosimo, Grand Prix champion from a couple of years back, not a good day. Thomas Enevoldsen from Denmark, well, he made it into day 2, but at 6-3. Andy Gantz, who goes to every European Grand Prix in the history of the world, and most of the North American Grand Prix when there isn't one in Europe too, he went 7-2. Francesco Giorgio, fresh off his 11-4-1 at Pro Tour Ixalan, he didn't make it to day 2. But Piotr Glogowski, I said last week, I love seeing people in strange places. Now, there's nothing strange about seeing Piotr Glogowski, brackets, a Polish Magic player, at a Polish Magic Grand Prix. But there was something quite disconcerting about, I'm sitting here in the booth, looking out on a Friday, and there's Piotr Glogowski. 5 days ago, I was sitting at the news desk in Albuquerque, and he was sitting there in the top 8, 20 feet in front of me. And now here we are, 5 days, any number of flights, different convention centre, same game, still us. It's very weird when you just see, wait, weren't you just in? Well, yeah, of course you were, but there's this very weird disconnect. Anyway, he went 6-3, and just sitting along from him, also going 6-3, was Christian Hauck, who, of course, from Team Phoenix 404, had made the top 8 of Pro Tour Ixalan. Jasper Grimmers, a long-term German, what I call mid-tier grinder. Someone who has the capacity to make top 8, someone who is in the thick of things on day 2, rarely has a terrible day, and shrugs it off when he does. The sort of opponent who routinely beats normal players all the time, but is found wanting at the very highest level. He went 7-2. Thomas Horvath of Hungary, 6-3. Francesco Hugini, the Italian Grand Prix champion from earlier this year, didn't make it through. Arne Huschenberg went 6-3, didn't care at all. I told you about him last week. He was one of those players, the silver pros, who took their silver invite at Pro Tour Ixalan and got to exactly 11-5, which brings him back to Pro Tour Bilbao in February. So great job by him there. Viktor Kazanskis, he's going to be in action for, I think, Lithuania. I think I've got that right. Maybe Estonia. Anyway, Viktor Kazanskis will be at the World Magic Cup, playing for either Estonia or Lithuania. He went 7-2. Akos Kenyeres, 8-1. Hannes Karem, great job. Now, this is Estonia. I know this for sure. 9-0 on the day with 2 byes, so fantastic. And he was playing this green-blue pummeler deck. Now, in the past, I've been a bit sniffy about Electrostatic Pummeler. It's not a card that I have a strong affinity with. That's not a pun intended, though it is, you know. But watching Hannes Karem play, what I realised is the way he was playing this deck, certainly, it was basically modern Infect. I love Modern Infect. And Legacy Infect. In fact, I just love it. In fact, I love Infect. I love Infect, in fact. So, I watched Hannes Karen play, and every time I watched him, I was like, this deck is beautiful. He's sitting there going, oh, durdle, fiddle about, bit of energy, bit of a tune. This is an electric static pummeler. What are you going to do about it? They go, we're going to kill it. And he goes, you're not. Blossoming Defense. And then they go, we're going to kill it. And he goes, no, you're not. Because he's got something else that stops it happening. And then he goes, what life are you on? 1068? Not a problem. And he goes, so I'm going to pay 3 energy here. Then I'm going to cast this, which generates some energy. Now I've got 9 energy. Now I'm going to double the power of my electrostatic pummeler. Now I'm going to larger than life my electrostatic pummeler. Now it is enormous. Now it is more than enormous enough to kill you completely dead in one hit. Fantastic! How much fun is that deck? If you've not played the Green-Blue Pummeler deck, I strongly recommend it. We'll talk more in a bit about that. Florian Cox 6-3, Gabor Coxis of Hungary 6-3, Tommy Lindgren from Sweden. We don't often see him these days, and we didn't see him on day 2 either. He was gone. Dave Murphy had a bit of a collapse. Dave C, SEA, as you know him, on streaming during the weekdays in Europe. While America's asleep, Dave C goes to work on the internet. He was playing the Mono White Vampires deck. We got him in the feature match area, I think at 5-1. He ended up 6-3 and faded from contention. So it looks like, not just because of Dave C, but it does look like the Mono White Vampires list, rather than being a stepping stone from the Pro Tour and now it's a legitimate Tier 1 deck in Standard, looks like that's not true, fundamentally. So we'll watch this space, we'll look at Portland and see what happened, but there were no vampire lists in any of the top 8s this past weekend. It doesn't look like it's Tier 1, which is a shame, because I love it when cards like a Danto Vanguard get to be legitimate constructed cards. Ferenc Naj of Hungary went 6-3. He's going to be part of their World Magic Cup team. Branko Nurink of the Netherlands, 8-1. Good job by him. He was playing Godfarrow's Gift. Unsurprisingly, I suppose, you weren't going to be able to notice the bump in popularity for energy lists by Seth Manfield winning the Pro Tour. I guess you might have seen a few more Sultai lists, but energy was always going to be a huge deal. But Pascal Maynard being the flag bearer for the Godfarrow's Gift, I think there were a lot more Godfarrow's Gift decks running around, if they could be said to be running around, because decks don't have legs, because of Pascal Maynard. And one of those was Branko Nurink, who, as I say, went 8-1. Kiura Patel of England, 7-2, part of the Axion Now crowd. Good job by him, very solid day 2. He's turning into a very solid GP performer. The trick now is to make him a very solid Pro Tour performer. That's the next level up, obviously. Alexei Ryabakon, 7-2. Toriel Severin, who had a Grand Prix top 8 just a few weeks back, he was on the case again at 8-1. Pretty sure he lost in the last round. He was playing an energy deck. Then Marcin Stachiwa. See, I stammered over Stachiwa. Sorry about that. Grand Prix champion. He went 8-1, and he was the guy. Yes, he was. He was Mr. Mardu Vehicles. Remember we said last week, it's on the shelf, and somebody somewhere goes, is it marduvehicles.com? Oh, it is! 8-1 for Stachiwa with Mardu Vehicles. Helmut Sommersberger didn't make day 2, but Sam Vuillo certainly did. From France, 9-0. And as we're going to talk later, no offence to Sam, Sam is the slowest Magic player in the history of the game. It is quite beyond me how he managed to get to 9-0 without any unintentional draws. Because that's what playing against Sam Vuillo feels like. Oh my god, he's slow. He's gouge your eyeballs out with a hot rusty spoon slow. We'll talk more about slow play in the top 8. We'll have plenty of time. So that's San Brio. Pete Ward of England, one of the Harryuya Hopes, which I think is a fantastic scheme. We'll probably talk more about that on a quiet show sometime in the future. And Arnos Zidic, who was one of my favourite players when I started doing coverage. He was a big star of Czech Magic. He didn't make day 2, but it was great to see him again battling on the European Grand Prix scene. And I've told you all about that lot, and we haven't even got to the 3 buys yet. Here are the 3 buys. Pierre Dajon playing Teamer, 7-2. Javier Dominguez playing Teamer, 7-2. Ivan Flock playing Teamer, 7-2. Steve Hatto playing Teamer, didn't make day 2. Martin User playing Teamer, went 6-3, didn't play very well there, did I? Then, as he said on social media, then again, I did fly home from the United States overnight, had no sleep, and then attempted to play day 1 of a GP. Oops. Have to tighten up my play tomorrow if I want to get anywhere. Fair. Gregor Kowalski, who until Glogowski made the top 8 of Ixalan last week, I would have said routinely was the best Polish player, for sure. Kowalski went 8-1 with 4-colour energy. Joe Larson had a disappointing day and said so with Sultai, presumably the same as Seth Manfield's list or their update of that. He went 6-3. Valentin Mackel took the wrong approach. It was Jeskai approach. It did not make him into day 2. He has 6 Grand Prix top 8, so he'll be back. Andrea Mengucci playing Teamer, there it is again, 7-2. Matteo More of Italy as well. He was playing Godfarer's Gift, but not successfully. Didn't make day 2. Panagiotis Papadopoulos. Here's the first mention, I think the first mention of the show, of Ramanap Red. Where's that been hiding? Yeah, he played Ramanap Red, went 7-2. Matteo Rizzi was on the starting list, but never showed. Obviously just decided, no, I'll pay my entry fee, but I'm not making it to Poland. Time for a weekend off. Mark Tobias, 7-2, with, he called it 4-colour control, and so we acceded to that and put up 4-colour control. It is an energy deck, though. So, semantics. And finally, Peter Viren, 7-2, with Teamer. So, not a great day for the pros, quite frankly. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 players with 3 buys. 1, 2, 3. 3 were out. 2 were at 6-3. 7 were at 7-2. Only Kowalski got to 8-1. And there were no 9-0s. All in all, pretty disappointing day 1 for the pros. Now, sometimes that's just the luck of the draw. That's just how it goes. I mean, for any one person, it's just made up of a series of matchups that you win or you lose. 13 is not an enormous number. It means that between them, they played 75 matches of Magic, and you only need to add 5 wins on the balance sheet to suddenly have a 9-0 and 4 8-1. So it's not like they were that far away from a good first day. Sometimes Standard doesn't lend itself to the best players dominating. That was day 1 in Warsaw. Which brings us rather neatly, I say neatly as I flick over pages in my notebook, to day 1 in Atlanta. So, about 11 years ago, Kenji Samura, Tomohiro Saito, and Shuhei Nakamura were arguably the 3 best players in the game. I say arguably because you could point to both of the Ruel brothers, Olivier Ruel and Antoine Ruel, and even though he wasn't that active, Gabriel Nassif. So 3 Japanese players, 3 French players were right up there. And to me, who was just starting to do event coverage, these were the true superstars of the game. I felt profoundly honoured to get to speak to them. Indeed, I felt pretty excited just seeing them. And I very clearly remember Grand Prix Toulouse in France in 2006. And I remember a visceral thrill when I saw that just standing in the doorway were Tomohiro Saito, Shuhei Nakamura, and Kenji Samura. There was something exotic, there was something alien about these Japanese superstars. They did not look or sound like me. They were different. This was phenomenally exciting and wonderful. And it didn't do any harm that they were incredibly good at Magic and routinely won all the tournaments they turned up to. So, right now, I'm going to be a real fanboy and say that I kind of feel the same way about the story of Corey Baumeister and Brad Nelson. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, remember that I literally wrote a book about Brad Nelson when he became Player of the Year. So I got to know Brad very well, and he was incredibly giving to me in being open about the human being that he was. And he's not an obviously heroic figure. Right? He's a normal human being with all sorts of foibles and flaws and tics that we all have. And it was a fantastic time and something I look back on with incredible fondness and gratitude. So I am predisposed towards supporting Brad and Corey. But even setting that aside, to me, what they've been doing this season is so crazy because they are defying all mathematical logic, and they're also defying all mathemagical logic, if I may call it that, because the law of math says that you can't keep winning forever because regression to the mean, and if I've got that phrase right, please don't kill me, mathematicians, if I've used that phrase in a slightly inappropriate way. But just the idea that if over a period of time you're going to average at 66%, if you're averaging at 90%, eventually that's going to come down because nobody gets to do that ever. It's never happened, it never will, basically. So that's the simple math. But the mathemagical math is that your edge over people who are prepared at the back end of Grand Prix, people who are routinely bringing good decks to the tournament, who are Grand Prix grinders, who are always in day 2 of Grand Prix, who are making top 8s of Grand Prix. These are people who you don't have a 90% win rate against. These are the people you have a 50-something win rate against, and then you beat up on all the people who are considerably worse than you to bring your average up. But that's not what's happening with Corey Baumeister and Brad Nelson. Every week that there's a standard Grand Prix, they turn up with the best deck that is tuned the best to beat the best that they believe the field will have responded to create the new metagame for this week. Then they beat everyone, and then they go right back home and start planning it again for the following weekend. It is absurd what they're doing. It is the whole point of Magic. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about Rollerball. Rollerball is one of my favourite films of all time. This is from 1972, the year 1974, I think. James Caan. It's a futuristic film in which energy corporations have taken over the world. There are no countries anymore. There are sort of city-states, and Houston is the energy state. And James Caan plays this incredibly violent blend of roller skating, and ice hockey, and American football called Rollerball. And it is designed to be next to impossible. It's played on a circular banked track, a bit like a cycling velodrome. And there's a lot of very deep 70s trippy stuff going on. But underneath it all, what's happening is it's a state-controlled sport designed to show the futility of man. And James Caan plays the hero Jonathan E., or the anti-hero in some ways. His name is Jonathan E. You never find out. Actually, you do find out what the E is for, but anyway. He is the best player in the history of rollerball, and is therefore hugely worshipped and adored by pretty much everyone on planet Earth, with its now limited resources and very concentrated power in a handful of giant corporations. And this is bad news for the corporations, because as John Houseman, who plays the head of the Houston Energy Corporation, explains to Jonathan, rollerball is not a game in which man is supposed to grow strong. Just think about that. It's a game designed to showcase that man is not very good at it, and that it is pointless to try to be good at it. Well, Magic's a game that man is not supposed to grow strong in. And by man, I do of course mean woman, man, boy, girl, child, grandma, and everyone in between, of course. But humankind, we're not supposed to grow strong at Magic. And what happens when we grow strong? Well, actually, we end up banning cards. That's kind of what's going on. It's like, we've solved Standard. Everyone knows that this deck is the best deck. We cannot continue this game. The game has been broken. You must change the nature of the game. In rollerball, what they do is when they get to the playoffs, they get rid of lots and lots of the rules against the violence in the sport. And indeed, so the whole point of this, gradually, as it becomes clear as they go through the top 8, as it were, the quarters and the semis and the final, the goal of this is actually to make this guy, Jonathan E., die. To demonstrate finally to the world that it is just a futile exercise to be trying, that you just shouldn't bother. It cannot be done, the game cannot be beaten. Society needs to understand that it is the corporations that look after you, and no one is above the game, no one is above the law, no one is above rollerball. And so eventually they get to the final, and the deal is there is no time limit, no penalties, no substitutions. And so basically, a dozen people go out onto the rink, and they know that 11 of them are going to die, or be rendered completely, at the very least, unconscious and incapacitated and crippled forever. It's a charming sport. Jonathan wins. He's the last man standing, and he jams the metal ball right into the goal. And there's this iconic shot of him staggering up the track on his skates to ram it in. And there's this clang, and it just reverberates around. And the last act is him skating round and round the rink. And the crowd start chanting, as they've been chanting for him throughout the games. Jonathan, 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 Jonathan. It's like that. And he comes right round, and the camera's watching him, and he comes closer and closer, and it goes incredibly blurry, and you just see his face caught like that. That's the end of Rollerball. It is one of the great movies of all time. I encourage you to go watch it. Right now, I feel that Standard is a bit like Rollerball. That Corey Baumeister and Brad Nelson, or Corey Nelson, to conflate the two, are skating round and round the rink, and it doesn't matter how you change the rules, they're just better than everyone else. It's ridiculous. It's glorious. It's marvellous. We'll talk more about them in a bit. So on day one, let's talk about some 2-bye players first of all. Oscar Christensen, 8-1 from Denmark. Turns out a lot of people had stayed on from the Pro Tour to hang out and go again the following week. So was a pretty stacked field in Atlanta. Sorry to use that stacked word, and a lot of people don't like that. So Christensen, 8-1. Eli Cassis went 6-3. Zach Elsick, Mr. Lantern Control, hooray! Didn't make it in, boo. Pat Cox, who missed out last week at the Pro Tour, didn't make it again this time. 6-3 for Jack Kiefer. Doesn't sound that great, but Kiefer's very much on the rise. 15, played in the Pro Tour last week, part of the card hoarder crowd. Chris Larsen from Denmark, fresh off carrying Seth Banfield on his shoulders, 7-2. Corey McDuffie, we don't see him at everything, but he generally does pretty well when he does turn up, 8-1. Stephen Neal from Hot Sauce, 6-3. Ben Rasmussen went 7-2. Colin Roundtree, who, as we mentioned last week, has not had a great record at PT level, had another good day at the Grand Prix, 8-1. Ray Sato went 7-2. Frank Scarron didn't make it through. Shaheen Sarani, Mr. Grix's control, of course, 8-1. Zan Syed, who's someone I'd like to keep an eye on because he strikes me as a very together human being. I think he's training to be a doctor or a vet or some other form of keeping organisms alive kind of guy. He's 7-2. Ben Weitz and Yao Zeel, the Chinese player, didn't make it through. Jarvis Yu went 6-3. But what about the 3-bye players? Well, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and there were 15 of them. How many do you think of the 15 3-bye players made day 2? If I gave you the option of 10, 12, 14, or 15. It's 15. Every single one of them converted 3-byes into day 2. Now next year, that's not going to be quite as big an achievement as it currently is, regardless of how many byes you have, because a lot of the time, day 2 is going to happen after 8 rounds. We'll talk about the system for next year down the line, but it is worth bearing in mind that it's going to start being 8 on day 1, 7 on day 2, with the cut at 6-2. So actually getting into day 2 is going to be quite hard. But once you're in, you then have that extra round to catch up. Anyway, 6-3, Shuhei Nakamura. 6-3, Steve Rubin. 7-2, Ben Stark, Hall of Famer. He was playing this medium red deck. So it was a kind of Ramanat red deck, but it had cut some low-end things. It had put in some middle things. There was some Sand Stranglers in there. There were, what's the silly thing called? Rampaging Ferocidon, that's it. A couple of treasure maps. He was starting Chandra Torch of Defiance in his main deck. He went 7-2 on day 1. Fair enough. Nathaniel Smith went 7-2. Niels Moller, the English World Magic Cup captain, went 7-2. Seth Manfield, former world champion, 7-2. Ben Friedman, 7-2. Paul Dean, 7-2. All perfectly solid, none of them in prime position for the top 8. At that point, you would need at least 5 wins on day 2, possibly a 6th, and certainly one would think more than the 5 wins. So if you got 5 wins in a row, then maybe you could ID in at 12, 2, and 1. But even that, I don't think was certain. 8-1 is where you wanted to be. 8-1. Corey Baumeister, there he is. Alexander Hayne, fresh off his 12th fall from the Pro Tour, went 8-1. Brad Nelson was 8-1. Greg Orange 8-1. Matt Severa 8-1. And Noah Walker from Cardholder was 8-1 as well. Now the thing with Baumeister and Nelson, as you can imagine, being in Europe, Gainsborough is part of Europe technically still, despite Brexit. That's 2 weeks in a row I've talked about Brexit, though very tangentially. These two, another sort of analogy, it's like Tiger Woods in golf. I'm in Europe, which means that by the time coverage starts of Atlanta, it's, whatever it is, 9 o'clock at night in Warsaw. On Sunday, we've got the whole pack down still to do. So by the time I've had dinner and got back to the hotel, it's 11 o'clock at night, and I have to decide, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to bed, am I going to watch some TV, am I going to watch some Netflix, am I going to play some games, or am I going to watch the coverage? And in the way that a lot of golfers, with casual golf fans, would tune in if Tiger Woods had a chance of winning, because he was the golfer that everyone knew. Sort of feels a bit like that in standard GPs with Corey and Brad. You're like, I wonder if either of them can make the top 8 again. I wonder if both of them can make the top 8 again. I can't wait to tune in to find out. It's this fantastic storyline, a bit like regular season in the NBA where one team randomly goes on a streak, or whether the Golden State Warriors are going to get to their record-breaking end-of-season record. It's not about the individual game or the match that they're playing, they're part of a bigger storyline. I think that's great for Magic. So they're both at 8-1. And then the 9-0s, well, there was one 9-0 from the 3x players, and that was Petr Sahurek from the Czech Republic, who I expected to see in Warsaw, but decided to stay put in the US. The 9-0s, Sahurek was the only known name, really. Trevor Coulombe, Justin Rios, Marlon Garcia, all went 9-0, great job by them. And Sam Michels messed up the undefeated record by being 8-0-1. So that's where things stood at the end of Atlanta on day one. So I'm going to take a sponsored break because this show is brought to you in association with Morrison's Diet Lemonade. And I will be right back with the story of day two in Shanghai, in Warsaw, in Atlanta. I'll tell you a really short, really bad joke. I'll talk about Portland. And then I'll finish telling you about Friday in Warsaw. See you in a minute. Do 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 do. Welcome back to Talking Points or Talking Points. With me, your host, Rich Hagon. We have already talked about day one in Shanghai. We've talked about day one in Warsaw. We've talked about day one in Atlanta. Now we're going to do it all again, but instead of Saturday, we're going to talk about Sunday. Because that's a completely different day of the week where other things happened. Things like this. So, Shanghai. Where did we get to? Well, it went a bit like this. Kelvin Chu, who'd been 8-1, he turned that into 12-3. That's often a good finish, but not enough for the top 8. Yu Watanabe turned 8-1 into 13-2. That's always enough, just about always, for the top 8, and it was on this occasion. Kazumaki Fujimura packed it in at 8 wins, 152nd, no points for him. Hao Shan Huang won a couple of games on Sunday, but not enough, 113th. Top 32 for Yuki Ichikawa. He had a good day, turned 6-3 into 11-4. One place ahead he was of Kenta Haran, who was 7-2 overnight, turned that into 11-4. 4-2 is good. Not enough for the top 8, though. 33rd for Haran, warming up nicely for the World Magic Cup, though. Toru Ino turned 6-3 into 10-5, so a 4-2 record for him, 82nd. Takuma Morifuji. I'll come back to him in a mo. Tomohiro Saito turned 7-2 into 12-3 and 9th. Oh, so close. So Saito, right on the edge of another top 8. It's going to happen. He's turning up to lots of GPs. He's right in the forefront of the Magic community in Japan. He's going to make another top 8. And then at some point, you and I will have a little talk about Tomohiro Saito and the Hall of Fame. It may not even be that little a talk, just to let you know. So that was Saito. Ryoichi Tamada, 7-2 into 11-4, top 32 for him. Ken Yukihiro had a better day, 6-3 became 11-4, good enough for 42nd place. Liu Yu Chen probably disappointed. He was 8-1 overnight, finished on home soil at 11-4. That was good enough for 22nd. Yan Wing Chung, who was also 8-1 overnight, well, he got the job done. He got to 12-3, usually not enough. Turned out there were multiple players on 12-3 who made it in. He made it in. And Kelvin Chu was one of the 12-3s that made it in to the top 8. Now, Takuma Morifuji had done something really quite exciting, if you like stats and are nerdy like me. Because Takuma Morifuji had started out 9-0 on day one. And then he'd won his air quotes first draft pod. Remember, this is standard, so there are no pods. But nonetheless, he'd got to lunchtime and had aced the morning. And so that took him to 12-0. And he was therefore very close to the top 8. He wins again in round 13. And at this point, knows he's a lock for the top 8. But he might as well try and get first seed. And he plays and he wins and goes to 14-0. And he plays and he wins and goes to 15-0. Which means that, once again, we're back on the perfection watch. Because similar to American football, where you talk about the 1972 Miami Dolphins or various New England Patriot teams in my lifetime, There's something magical about this idea of perfection. It's clearly nonsense, because anyone who goes 15-0 has almost certainly lost a bunch of games, lost hundreds of life points, made many misplays, probably made just any number of mistakes. The idea of perfection is garbage, but it's still incredibly sexy to pay attention to. So at 15-0, Morifuji is 3 matches away from perfection, which nobody has ever done over 15 rounds and then the top 8. Either a draw gets in the way, they ID in the last couple of rounds, that happens a lot, or, more commonly, they just lose in the top 8 somewhere along the line. So we're really excited for Morifuji to see what happens there. So he comes in and he's playing Ramanap Red, which seems like, again, only the second time in the show that we've mentioned that at all, unless you count Ben Stark, which wasn't really the same deck. It had a lot of the same cards, but very definitely a different feel and goal and structure and strategy and so on. But Morifuji was Ramanap Red. He faced Hiranao Tanaka in the quarterfinals, who was playing Ramanap Red. And it was Tanaka who won that. So Tanaka knocks out Morifuji, perfection dies, Tanaka doesn't care and moves on to the semi-finals. Same half of the bracket, Yan Wing Chun, who by the way is playing Ramanap Red, was up against Li Wing Tat, who was playing Ramanap Red. Wait a second, I've just said Ramanap Red over and over and over and over. That's the entire top half of the bracket was Ramanap Red. Where have they been hiding? Okay, well, Yan Wing Chun took that down by 2-0 and then went on to face Tanaka in the semi-finals. Bottom half of the bracket, it was like another tournament. Song Huao Chao was playing Tima and he was up against Kelvin Chu, who was playing Tima. Huao Chao won that 2-0, and that left Yuya Watanabe with his 4-colour energy deck to play Akada Noya with his Grixis Tokens deck. So, I think it's only fair to acknowledge, no idea what this deck's about at all. This Grixis Tokens, I mean, I do. There are some card names that I could look up for you. There are Maverick Thopterists running around making tokens. There are Metallic Rebukes countering things. There's Inventor's Goggles making things 2/3s and flying and stuff. There's blue cards that make 1/1 flyers through energy. There's decoction modules getting you energy left, right and centre and bouncing things and just... The deck was absurdly wonderful. Frank Karsten and Matej Zatlkai had a stab at working out what the hell was going on. But quite frankly, a couple of sort of general points. And look, if you want to go and play with Grixis Tokens at your next F&M, or indeed at Grand Prix Portland next weekend, good on you, good luck. But let's remember a couple of things here. First of all, this is a standard that is solved. This is standard where everyone knows that energy is the best deck. So yes, if you want to play Grixis Tokens, good luck to you. Also, bear in mind, this was like a throwback to the days, I'm going to say 2004 to 2008 as a very rough benchmark. The days when you knew that everything you knew about whatever the format was irrelevant because Japan was going to turn up and tell you what the format actually was like. So you could be in a format of mono black aggro, mono white aggro, and white red aggro as the 3 decks and know that there was a bad blue black control deck. And let's say that was the known standard. Japan would come along with a green-blue turn 3 combo deck. And you just go, oh, yep, that beats all 4 of the decks that are in the known solved metagame. And you just watch and go, Okay, well done. They broke it. We had no idea what Standard was really like. We were playing one game, they were playing something entirely different. This guy, Akada Naoya, just playing a different game of Magic to everyone else. Clearly the deck of the weekend. It's not even like calling it the breakout deck of the weekend. It's just the deck of the weekend. Grixis Tokens? Pardon? Behave! You could have picked this up as a Kaladesh draft deck 6 months ago. It's just... yeah! What I say is, hats off! Yes, hats off, Akada Naoya. Thanks. So, he plays Yuya Watanabe, who's playing 4-colour energy. And Naoya wins. Which is kind of nice, because it's good to see a Grixis Tokens deck in the semi-finals. In the semi-finals, in the Ramanat red half of the bracket, Hironaga Tanaka defeats Yan Wing-chun, so Yan Wing-chun goes out in the semi-finals with Ramanat red. Heard that song somewhere before. Talking of Song Hua Chao defeats Akada Naoya 2-0, which means that Tima goes through to the final. Grixis Tokens out in the semis. Oh, sad. And then in the final, Song Hua Chao with Tima over Hironaga Tanaka 2-0. Tima wins the Grand Prix. Well, what to make of all that then? 3 energy decks, 2 Tima, 1 4-colour, 4 Ramanat red decks, and this Grixis Tokens. Well, so first of all, hooray for Grixis Tokens. That's fantastic news. Great to see that there. B, Ramanat red surely shouldn't be half of the top 8. C, energy is still clearly the best shell. I don't even want to call it archetype precisely. It must be very close between Tima and 4-colour, because no one seems prepared to call it as on the basis of evidence. Whenever every time you sleeve one or the other up, you're calling it. You'll say, I think 4-colour energy is better. But no one seems prepared to demonstrate that there is one correct energy build. So 4-colour, Tima, Sultai didn't appear in the top 8. There we go. A good GP. Well done to Yan Wing-chun in terms of proness. He and Yuya were the big winners, getting into the top 8 there. And so we didn't feel like we'd learnt an awful lot coming into day 2 in Warsaw, other than this guy Akada had just come up with this fantastic Grixis Tokens deck. So back we go to Warsaw, where I was and where I played Magic on Friday, and I'll tell you a bit more about that at the end of the show. So how did the players work out? Well, of the players with 0 and 1 buys that we mentioned earlier, obviously it's very hard to accelerate, but Sasha Lucia, hats off, Marshall, hats off. Sasha Lucia turned 8 and 1 into 12, 2 and 1, so 4 wins, 1 loss and a draw, which is a fine record on day 2. It was agonisingly not enough. With his 1 bye, he finished 9th. That's a tremendous performance. It is absolutely noteworthy. It is spotlight worthy. And we will certainly be watching Sasha Lucia in the future. What if he came from Andalusia? It'd be Sasha Lucia from Andalusia or something. That'd be awful. And watching him in the future would be very different. Yeah, I mustn't let that get in my head. We're doing that at the Pro Tour news desk. And now, everybody, someone Marshall told me about. Hats off, Marshall. So Sasha Lucia, 12, 2 and 1, 9th place, brilliant finish. No one wants to finish 9th, but great job. Of the 2 buys, David Brooker with his energy deck, he started out at 8 and 1, fell away. Autumn Burchett, 7, 1 and 1 overnight, went 5 wins and a loss. 12, 2 and 1 final score, good enough for 10th. Played even flock in the last round, one finished 10th. Again, on the one hand, very disappointed, I imagine. On another, both of those players knew going into their feature match that probably they were out even with a win and that they were playing for top 16. So it won't have come as a surprise, even if it was a disappointment. Meanwhile, Autumn demonstrated once again that she's very good at Constructed. Remember, she went 9-1 at a Pro Tour in Constructed, in Standard. So she's very well positioned for some Team Unified Standard at the World Magic Cup. She's alongside Niels Moller and Ross Broxup for Team England. And she's very well positioned to have more strong finishes at the GP level. So a good weekend, but anytime you win your win and in, you're going to feel disappointed when you finish 10th, which she did. No particular joy for Chosa or Chronopoulos or Enna Volton. Andy Gantz turned 7-2 into 12-3. That was good enough for 22nd place. Glagowski faded away, so did Christian Hawk. Jasper Grimmer turned 7-2 into 11-4, so a 4-2 on day 2. Also 4-2 on day 2 for Victor Kazanskis from 7-2. And Akos Kenyeres went 3-3, disappointingly, from 8-1. Hannes Karem continued his green-white pummeling, as it were, to make the top 8. Ferenc Naj had a good day. He went 5-1 on day 2, added to his 6-3, took him to, only 11-4, which, is not good enough for much of anything in terms of points or prize money, but is nonetheless a strong showing. Branko Naring with his Godfair's Gifts, disappointing day. Couldn't get it going, sort of win one, lose one, get punched in the face a bit, come back, get punched in the face again, run out of rounds, finished 11-4, 3-3 on the day. 4-2 on the day for Kiura Patel of England, so that was good for him. Top 50 finish. Toral Severin from 8-1. Now, usually, you go 4-2 on day 2, you think that's fine. If you're 8-1, okay, that's 12-3. Was it enough? It was not. The energy didn't quite get there for Severin. He finished 12th. But bearing in mind he's just coming off a top 8, that's 2 top 16s, one of them being a top 8. This is tremendous stuff from Severin. Mardu Vehicles, here it is, Masters to see. Is it time for MarduVehicles.com? 8-1 turned into 11-4. It wasn't time for him. Sam Vuio, they gave him many more hours to play Magic, and he took advantage of them and made the top 8. So I was just waiting for Sam to untap. Pete Ward didn't trouble the scorers on day 2. So that brings us to the pros, the 3 bye players. How did they fare? Remember, no one was in fantastic shape, and it was a solid rather than spectacular day 1 turned into a solid but not spectacular day 2. Dajon with Tima finishes 11-4 in 41st. Dominguez 7-2 into 11-4. Flock 7-2 into 11-3-1. So 4-1-1 on the day. Good enough for the top 32. Martin User had a good day. He said he needed to tighten up. Probably got a good night's sleep. Improve things. 6-3 turned into 11-4. So a 5-1 day 2 is good. That's Martin User being excellent. He's a Hall of Famer, but it wasn't enough to really get meaningfully into the mix. 45th place for him. Joe Larson with 6-3 overnight. Well, he tightened up in a hurry. He 6-0'd day 2. Still only 27th place. When you're down in 6-3, your tie breaks are so hideous compared to the 8-1s and the 9-0s. You're going to be right at the bottom of the 12-3s. So he finished 27th. Andrea Mengucci, 7-2, had a very good day, 5-1, 12-3 overall, top 25 for him. Mark Tobias turned 7-2 into 11-4. Peter Viren turned 7-2 into 11-4. So that's how the pros did there. And so what did that mean in terms of the top 8 in Warsaw? Well, before we get there, just remember that what we ended up with was Alexander Privalov with ding, there's Mardu Vehicles. That was the one in Warsaw. He was playing Mardu Vehicles. Valerio Luminati, wasn't a lot of fun with his name in the chat room. Yes, there was. Plus the fact he was wearing an Illuminati headband. I guess you got to embrace it. Maybe his real name's Smith, Valerio Smith. and he just calls himself Illuminati. Anyway, he was playing Teema. Sam Rio, who'd made it into the top 8 and therefore had been given an up to 3-round time extension, was playing 4-colour Energy against Poland's Gregor Kowalski, who had made it all the way to the top 8 from 8-1 overnight. He was playing 4-colour Energy. In the bottom half of the bracket, we had Louis Bachot with Sultai Energy against Hannes Karen with the green-blue Pummeler deck. And then Jedrick Schmidt with Godfarer's Gift was up against Frenchman Jean-Emmanuel Depraz with 4-colour Energy. So, any approach? No. Any blue-black control? No. Any Ramanat red? No. Any energy? Teema, 4-colour, 4-colour, Sultai, 4-colour. 5 energy decks in the top 8. That's not super exciting. 3 different flavours, still 5 energy decks. And then 1 Godfarer's Gift, which I think might be on the low end given how many people seem to be playing it, but may well be right given, I guess, if people are prepared for it, and in the wake of Pascal Menard, it's not like it's going to be an unusual choice. So maybe I'm a little surprised to see only 1 in the top 8, but anyway, only 1. Green-blue Pummeler, 1 of those. Well, that's not a surprise to see exactly 1 in the top 8. And of course, there's 1 Mardu Vehicles, because there's always 1 Mardu Vehicles. So how did the top 8 play out? Well, Privalov with Mardu Vehicles lost to Illuminati, so that was Teema through to the semi-finals. We knew he was going to face a 4-colour energy deck. Was it going to be Kowalski or was it going to be Vrio? Well, it was Vrio. And there were so many actual slow play warnings, nearly slow play warnings, cries from the crowd for slow play warnings. Yeah. Now, I've got to say, I like Sam, and I love his team, Magic Corsairs crew. I love what they're doing. He's clearly good at Magic. He's going to run out of time, and he's going to get himself into a lot of trouble. We genuinely, so we're talking backstage on coverage, watching, at the booth end, watching the top 8 play out. And as Kowalski was 1-0 down in this match against Rio and struggling in game 2, we looked at each other and said, I don't know who to root for here. I don't know whether we want Kowalski to win, because then, oh God, there's going to be an entire game 3, and then Vrio could still win anyway, and then we'll be here till shortly before Christmas. Or whether we just want Vrio to close it out and win 2-0, and at least we can get on with the semi-finals and see what happens there. But genuinely, Sam Vrio is getting very close to knocking himself out of tournaments, either because he gets unintentional draws or because he's going to get game losses for slow play. Make no mistake, right now he has a proper issue with slow play. And so, sorry to be critical. I appreciate that Sam and other players are thinking about way more inside a game of Magic than I am capable of. But that doesn't stop the rules being playing in a reasonable pace in untimed matches. I think you can certainly argue that Rio was not playing at a reasonable pace at many points during not only the top 8, but the tournament. And when I end up on the show talking to you about how Sam Rio got knocked out of a tournament with a game loss for slow play, you will not be surprised, and neither will I. And I hope it doesn't happen, because that's a rubbish way to lose anything. But he got repeated warnings and he seemed incapable of playing faster. He just does everything at the most deliberate of paces. And I was talking off air with a couple of people who are also not known for the speed of their play, shall we say. And they said they just didn't know how he was still in the tournament. So we'll see what happens with that. But meanwhile, a fantastic job by him, using every second of his thought time. He defeats Kowalski, goes forward to the semi-finals against Illuminati, so Teema against 4-colour energy in the semis there. Bottom half of the bracket, Basho with Sultai Energy defeats Hannes Karem, and I've got to be honest, I was rooting for Karem. As I said earlier in the show, I loved the green-blue pummeler deck. Just seems like a ton of fun to me. But it was Basho who went forward, and so then it was going to be, well, is it going to be another energy list, or is it going to be the Godfarer's Gift? Well, it was 4-colour energy at the hands of Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, because he just took down Jedrick Simit. And so Tima, 4-colour energy, Sultai energy, 4-colour energy. So if you were just paying attention to Warsaw, you might think Standard was in a less exciting shape than if you combined Warsaw with Shanghai, where we had 4 Ramanat Red. Yes, we had energy decks, but we also had this Grixis tokens, and then you can look at Warsaw and you can go, hey, and look at this, we had Green-Blue Pummeler and we had Godfarer's Gift, as well as the energy decks and Mardu vehicles. Yeah, we got one of those in. But Warsaw itself, 4 energy decks in the top 4, bit disappointing. We get into the semis, and there Luminati defeats Vuio and advances to the final. That's why I'm able to record this show from home, because it's Wednesday and I've made it home by now. And then, sorry, that was unkind. And then Depraz defeats Basho in the 4-colour versus Sultai. 4-colour defeats Sultai. And then it's actually a pretty reasonable final. Depraz with 4-colour energy, Luminati with Tima. Neither of them vastly experienced, both first Grand Prix top 8s. Depraz emerged triumphant, 4-colour energy. And that was the tale of Warsaw on day 2. Apart from the fact that I need to tell you something more about Friday in Warsaw, which I'll do at the very end of the show. But for now, let's head back to Atlanta, which last time I checked was still in the United States of America. Hasn't seceded, not like Cornwall's trying to do. But how did our 2 and 3 by pros get on? Oscar Christensen, disappointing day 2, 8-1 into 11-4. Jack Keefe had a good day 2, 6-3 into 10-5, but that's still way out of contention, 116th. Chris Larson had a very good day, turned 7-2, which is just your average kind of thing, into 12-3. That put him into top 16. That's a really strong finish for the day. Corey McDuffie, 11-4, 3-3 on the day, disappointing. Ben Rasmussen, 3-3 on the day, finished 10-5. Disappointing. Colin Roundtree had another good day, but it wasn't quite good enough. 8-1 turned into 12-3. That was good enough for top 32, but not top 16. Ray Sato crashed and burned on day 2. Went from 7-2, had a couple of wins, but down in 183rd place. Shaheen Surani, think will be disappointed again. 8-1, 11-4. That's 3-3 on the day. Not where you want to be. Nor was Ann Syed. 7-2 into 10-5. Jarvis Yu had a good day. He went 5-1, finished 68th overall. But none of the 2 by players that we'd been watching troubled the top 8. Best was Colin Roundtree with that 19th place, 12-3, and Chris Larson, 12-3 in 14th. But our 3 by players, well, the door was very much open for them. And let's start with the headline news. There were 5 undefeated players coming into day 2 in Atlanta. Only 1 made the top 8. The other 4 had a wretched day. Peter Sahurek made it in, but Trevor Coulomb, 12-3. So 3-3 on the day, finished 12th. Justin Rios, 11-3-1. So that's 2-3-1 on the day, finished 32nd. Marlon Garcia, 11-3-1. 2-3-1 on the day, 35th. Sam Mickles, 11-3-1. 3-3 on the day, 33rd. 4 undefeated players basically coin flipped their way through day 2. Very disappointing for none of those to make the top 8. So that left the door ajar for a bunch of players to play catch up. Here's how the pros did. Corey Baumeister, top 8. That's 4 in a row. 4 standard Grand Prix in a row is, it's stupid. What's even more thrilling is if he turns up in Portland and goes for 5. Because that, to me, we are not in Portland this coming weekend, but I would want to just go and watch every match of Corey Baumeister to see if he can do it. Because we were sort of trying to, on the fly, look back through Magic history and see whether anyone had done 4 standard GPs in a row. It's very hard to track that kind of thing. Very hard. But we're pretty sure that 5 would represent something that just had never been done before. So whether that's in Portland or whether that's early next year maybe, or we'll just see. But Corey Baumeister, top 8, wow. Paul Dean went 11-4, finished 51st. Ben Friedman 7-2 into 10-5, 138th. Alex Hayne had a bad day, 3-3. You don't want that from 8-1. He finished 43rd. But no. Seth Manfield didn't have a good day. Withdrew. Niels Moller 7-2 to 11-4. Decent. Shuhei Nakamura also finished 11-4, but that was with a 5-1 day 2, which was great. Brad Nelson, yeah. Now he finished 10th, and he finished 10th by losing his last round to Ben Stark. Ben Stark, who of course was playing this medium red list. So at that point, Ben had eliminated one of the brothers. More in a minute. Greg Orange, 8-1 to 11-4, disappointing, but still 39th place. Steve Rubin, I suspect, didn't come back on day 2, not sure, but certainly didn't advance from 6-3. You'll often find that the top pros, if they're 6-3 overnight, won't come back necessarily to scrap to try and get points, but even if he did not go well. Maybe he plays one round, loses, drops. Matt Severa, 8-1 to 11-4, disappointing, but still 38th, which is not bad. Nathaniel Smith, 4-2 on the day, 62nd overall. Peter Sahurek turned his 9-2 into the top 8, and so did Ben Stark. Ben Stark, who at the last couple of Pro Tours in the past year has had multiple 7-1 day 1s, and has not converted. Now, obviously, it's a longer time period. It's like 8 rounds on day 1, 8 rounds on day 2 at the Pro Tour. But the conversion has been disappointing. So to go from 7-2 and just run the tables, he played Brad at 12-2 as his winner in, and he won to make it in. Fantastic stuff. Not least because the deck was built for a perceived metagame. It wasn't just, I continue to play the deck that I have been playing for, the life of this format. This was a straight up, I'm going to do this because I know it's just the best thing I can be doing for this weekend. It was pinpoint. And he gets to 13-2, makes the top 8. And finally, rounding out Noah Walker, very disappointing day. Losing record on day 2, 8-1 into 10-5, outside the top 100. Ugh, he'd like a redo on Sunday. So that brings us to the top 8 in Atlanta. So we've already talked about Japan, we've talked about Europe, we've got lots of Ramanat Red, we've got lots of energy, we've got the Weird Grixis tokens in Japan. We've got plenty of energy, we've got a Gold Pharaoh's Gift, we've got the Green Blue Pummeler in Warsaw. What did the Atlanta top 8 look like? Well, we had Sergio Garcia with 4-color energy against Sam Zabrewski on 4-color energy. We had Ben Stark on his Desert Red, his mid-range red, up against Corey Baumeister with Teamer. We had Ramanat Red for Trey Van Cleve up against Alex Lloyd with Esper Approach. We had Peter Sahurek with 4-color energy. And Lawrence Vess with, say it with me, Mardu Vehicles. 'Cause there's always one. Is it time for MarduVehicles.com? So what happened? Well, Garcia took care of Zabrewski by 2-0, so that put in the 4-color energy mirror. Obviously, 4-color energy goes through. Ben Stark, having defeated Brad Nelson, plays Corey Baumeister, the other brother, and beats him too. So it's not fratricide, because that's when one brother kills the other brother. This is just brother's side. There's got to be a word for that. Someone will tell me. Feel free to tell me. I won't hear you, but tell me anyway. Stark wins 2-1, and Corey goes out, but can't really complain, can you? 4 Grand Prix top 8s in a row in Standard. Roll on the 5th attempt. Can't wait to see that. Trey Van Cleve goes down with his Ramanat Red list to Alex Lloyd with Esper Approach. He got there. And then Mardu Vehicles beat Peter Sahurek in what looked like the upset of the round in terms of playability. That was probably the biggest mismatch in terms of you would think, hey, the pros got a really good shot here on play skill. But Vess goes through. So Lloyd then continues on, beats Vess in the semi-finals. So Esper Approach defeats Mardu Vehicles, gets to the final. And Ben Stark, with his Desert Red, defeats Sergio Garcia. So we had one energy deck getting through as far as the semi-finals, and then it lost. So only one energy deck in the top four. And the final was Desert Red against Esper Approach, which by most measures seemed to favour Esper Approach. Alex Lloyd won a very quick game one. There was very little to it. Ben Stark won a very quick game two. There was very little to it. There's no point in lying to you and telling you that these were epic matches. They weren't. They were super ordinary. Game three was decent. There was a bit of back and forth. It looked like there may be some uncertainty about who wins. In the end, though, it was Alex Lloyd with Esper Approach of the Second Sun who took down Stark's Desert Red. Now, that seemed a very unlikely finals matchup coming in. I don't think anyone would have predicted. You might have said an Esper Approach list would be in the top 8, sure. But Stark's deck was new. Esper Approach, very definitely not central to the format. Part of it, but not central to it. I think Atlanta was the most encouraging of the three. I think Warsaw was the least diverse, the least interesting, the least surprising. I think Japan had this weird red bias, but then this fantastic Grixis tokens list. And Atlanta, as I say, seemed the most entertaining of the bunch. So hats off to Alex Lloyd for winning Atlanta. Great job by him. And then in terms of the top 25, so this is from last week. Who played? How did they do? So here we go. Working our way up. Steve Rubin went 6-3 on day one, didn't then complete the course, no points. Alex Hain was 8-1, turned that into 11-4, 43rd. Carlos Romao, Martin Muller and Matt Nass didn't play. Corey Baumeister went out in the quarterfinals of Atlanta after an 8-1 day one. Great job. Pascal Menard, fresh out the final, didn't play. Sam Black, Brian Brown doing, Chris Calcano didn't play. I've no idea what happened to Chris Calcano because he said repeatedly in my hearing he wasn't coming to Grand Prix Atlanta, which always means he's coming to Grand Prix Atlanta, and yet he wasn't there. Extraordinary. Javier Dominguez turned 7-2 into 11-4 for 38th. Mike Sigrist was playing the Mox online. Li Shi Chan didn't play. Yuya Watanabe made the top 8 in Shanghai. Shota Yasuoka didn't play. Brad Nelson finished 12th in GP Atlanta with his 12-3 record. Sam Pardy was busy playing the Mox online. Kelvin Chu turned 8-1 on day one into a top 8 finish at GP Shanghai. Martin User had a bad day one at 6-3, but that brought him back to then go 5-1 and finish 11-4, and then didn't play Marcio Carvalho, Owen Turtenwald, William Jensen, Palavida Damarosa. Reed Duke played the Mox, and by the way, won that Magic Online event, so he had a fantastic weekend. And finally, your number one in the world, Seth Manfield, went 7-2 on day one, but then didn't convert on day two, and that is your top 25. So do 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 it's a kind of little break thing. So that takes us to next week. We're almost at the end of the show. I hope you've had fun. Next week, it's Grand Prix Portland. Now, there's no video coverage from there. We're taking a week off for good behaviour before we head into Lyon in France. Lyon's going to be fantastic because in addition to it being team limited, which is always fun, it's the week before the World Magic Cup. It's in the same country as the World Magic Cup, and it's only like a 4-hour train ride, an hour plane ride away from Nice, which is where the World Magic Cup is. So our guess is that there are going to be a lot of full teams from around the world that come to Grand Prix Lyon to play. So you may well see the Chilean national team, the French national team, the Greek national team playing as a trio. But even if you don't see that, you're going to see sort of 2 members of the team plus someone apparently random who they've sort of found pieced together to get the practice at Team Sealed and hopefully Team Draft for the top 4 later on. But the World Magic Cup, of course, just needs Team Sealed, 3 rounds of that on day 1. So we're expecting a hugely international field for Leon. And then, of course, the week after that, it is the World Magic Cup. The week after that, I'll be in Oklahoma City for Modern, which is one of my favourite formats, and that's going to close out my year at least. But next weekend, it's Portland, it's Standard. So the big questions are, Brad Nelson, Corey Baumeister, will they be there? If they are, will they do well? Yes. If they are and they do well, will Corey make a 5th Standard top 8 in a row? Crazy. And what is the shape of Standard going to be? Look, I think you can... There's a sort of big philosophical debate we can do about what does best mean? What is the best deck? I'm not sure what that means, but certainly one measure is in the trenches. What deck gives a typical player the best series of matchups against a known field? Excuse me just one moment. Thank you. Notice I'm not off screen there. I'm just like politely moving slightly to that way, because off screen it'd be like, oh my god, so hard to get over there. So the best deck is something that gives the most people the best chance against the most number of alternate decks. And in theory, that deck therefore has to be energy of some description. But it's not clear what version of energy that might be. And it's not even clear that that's the best path to victory in an event. Yes, Jean-Emmanuel Depraz won the GP with 4-color energy. And yes, if we look and see what happened in Shanghai, Song Huaqiao won with Teamer energy, and then we look at Esper Approach winning, but we also saw the Desert Red, we saw Godfarer's Gifts, we saw Green Blue Pummeler, we saw Grixis Tokens, and of course we saw Mardu Vehicles, because we see Mardu Vehicles. So, although I'm the first to acknowledge that people are kind of fed up with turn 1 and tune with Ether, there is starting to be a kind of visceral response to that, and just like, really? Do we have to see this again? Do we? I don't really think you can argue that Standard's in a bad place. It looks like you can play almost anything, and if you play it well, you have a shot at doing really well. And I'm not sure you want anything else out of Standard. So, what will Portland bring? Will it be the final consolidation of everything energy, and suddenly the field is back to 50% energy? Will it be an open top 8 with all kinds of innovation again? Don't know. And I guess that's why we have shows like this, so that we can talk about what happened in Portland next week on the show. So there's just 2 more things to do before I leave you. The first is a very short joke. It's very short. Not like last week. Oh my god, no. It's very short. And then I want to tell you something about Friday night in Warsaw, because something quite interesting happened to me in Friday night in Warsaw. So, first of all, just before we go, I'm going to play a little game of Keep or Mulligan with you. It's Ixalan Draft. I'm playing blue-white skies, pretty aggressive, and I've got a couple of 1-drops and 5 land. 5 land, 2 1-drops. And I say to my friend, I don't know whether this is keeper or mulligan. And he points to one of the 1-drops and says, it's a sure keeper. So, Friday in Warsaw. Let me tell you what happened on Friday in Warsaw. So, I was going out. I was going to have dinner. I may have mentioned this earlier in the show, and I talked to my friend Jason Howlett, and he said it was going to be about an hour and a half, so I said I was going to do a turbo draft, and that's where you play 1 round and drop, and that's the lowest sarcasm, the lowest form of wit, and I'm saying that basically it's the lowest form of competitive magic, unless of course you commander. And so I sit down and I start drafting. I draft this terrible deck, and I have Glorifier of Dusk, and I get the call, and I get 3 vampires and all that stuff, and I get lots of 5-drops. I have 8 5-drops in my deck. I sit down and I play against this guy, and we meet and we start chatting, and he seems fun. He seems like part German, part French, and I think maybe he's Swiss, but in fact he's French. And we chat away, and we have really good times. And he wins game 1, and I win game 2, which is extraordinary. But I go double Skymarch Bloodletter, and I get to fly over and kill him. And then in game 3, he has this Conqueror's Galleon thing, the 2/10, and then it flips, and then he has Pounce out of his graveyard, and he spends 8 mana returning his Pounce from the graveyard, and he does kills things with his big dinosaurs and keeps killing me, but I keep pressuring him back, and we're having fun times. I'm sort of commentating on the game, and we're really chilling out, and he's a big fan of me, which is a good thing that you can do. And we get to the end of the game, and eventually he wins, and well done him, and he goes away. And as I think I said at the start of the show, I realised that I hadn't even bothered finding out the guy's name, and I think that's kind of weak. And I realised that although I'd had a really fun hour with this human being, I didn't know who it was, and I likely never would. Except, of course, 48 hours later, that Frenchman, Jean-Emmanuel Depraz, won the Grand Prix. I will see you on episode 3 next week of Talking Points, or Talking Points. Bye-bye.